Good morning, everyone. I'm going to record a brief presentation on the Formulas and Functions Participation Project. This is just from the lecture notes. There is a separate video for the actual presentation, and I'd like you to look at that. As well, I'll probably record a video just going over absolute references because it's so very important to what you're going to be doing. So let's go ahead and start, and let's take a look at what we've got here. You always see the topics covered slide. I'm going to skip that. What I want you to take away from today is first how to write formulas. One of the major features of Excel is its ability to perform math on the values in your workbook. And you want to write formulas to do that. And the trick of writing the formulas is first to start with an equal sign. And second, you always want to use cell references, just like you see right here. Instead of writing a formula that equals 26 plus 33, you're referencing cell C1. See the C there, the 1 there, that's cell C1, and C2. That way, if you change the values in those cells, the formula automatically updates. If you just have a static formula for 26 plus 33, it's only good as long as those values stay static. Okay? Now, what those references, the C1 and C2 are called, they're just plain cell references. They're not absolute, and if you copy and move things around, they'll change with you. And that's part of the magic of Excel. So let's go ahead here. A cell reference, just like I was saying before, with no qualifiers on it, is a relative reference. They're just how you point to the values stored in the worksheet. The most common type are relative references. That's what we were just dealing with. It's just a column letter and a row number like A1 or C3. If you copy it over, I'm going to go back a slide. For example, if you copied this formula right here over, the formula would automatically update to add D1 and D2. It saves you time and effort. That's what a relative reference is. So they say if you copy a formula referencing cell A1 to the right by one cell, the copied formula version is going to refer to B1. If you copy it down one, it'll refer to A2. These updates are normally helpful, but sometimes there are times when you don't want them. When pointing to cells storing fixed values like an interest rate, maybe the number of quizzes in a class, something like that, where it's always going to be that particular number in that particular cell, you might need to do what's called an absolute reference or a mixed absolute reference. So we're going to look at those next. Absolute references never, ever change, even when the formula is copied or auto-filled. They'll always refer to the same cell. And so you can see an absolute row and an absolute column reference over here in the upper left box. To indicate that it's absolute, you put a $ in front of whatever you don't want to change. So an absolute row and an absolute column would have a $ in front of the column and a $ in front of the row. Then it begins to get a little bit complicated. Row absolute mixed references change only the column part, and you'd put the $ before the row part. Column absolute mixed references change only the row part where the cell is copied. The column stays the same. You put the $ before the column part only, like B2. Clicking in the middle of the cell reference and pressing the F4 key will cycle through the options. Let me clarify that. I just sort of read it off there like a robot. Let me tell you what that means. So if I've got a cell in a formula, and I'm going to go back because it's right here. I've got a cell in a formula. If I double click and highlight the C1 and I hit F4, it's going to cycle through the different, whoops, I'm pointing to the wrong screen. Right here, C1. If I double click on that C1 and highlight it and hit F4, it's going to cycle through something like an absolute reference, a column absolute, then a row absolute, and then just an ordinary relative reference. Okay? So if you're not 100% sure, as long as you remember the $ goes in front of whatever you want to make absolute, not behind, but in front, and you hit that F4 key, you can figure it out pretty quickly. So that right here in a nutshell, those first 5 slides form the core of exam 1. You want to make sure that, especially what's on this slide 5, that you get. And I'm going to spend a lot of time, different examples, and the participation that we do, I think it's participation 5, that covers absolute references, is a literal boot camp and dragging you through the mud and leaving you out in the cold kind of thing. We want to make sure that you get this, because on exam 1, it's the difference between being able to successfully do the exam and just washing out. So this is something you want to make sure you can do. Now, statistical functions, a little bit easier. Excel includes common math and stat functions that you can use for a variety of calculations. There's no space between the equal and the function, and the functions start and end with the parentheses. And the range cells are separated by a colon. So you got average, you know what that is. Count just counts the number of cells in a range that have values in it. So as long as it's got a value in it, it's going to count it. It's a very basic function, but when you need to know how many there are of something, for example, let's say you got an inventory, and in the column you just need to know how many entries there are, it'll count it up for you. Max lets you find the highest number. Median is the midpoint in a range. It's not the same as the average. Min is the lowest value in a range, and sum totals up everything. It's just like a big adding machine for a column. Now, the most wonderful thing about Excel is not only do they give you these, but Excel will do the heavy lifting for you and help you figure out how to use the functions. So you can, if you want, almost like coding, I'll go back a cell or go back a slide. You could type equals average and then put the range in and be done. You could do equals count, put the range in and be done. But the next slide here, where you are inserting functions using the dialog box, you can search for something, and then for example, here he's searching for min, and he's going to hit go, and it's going to come up with options down here. The wonderful thing about it is when you search for that function, you might come up with several that are similar. You can click on it just like they've clicked on COUNTIF here, and it'll tell you what it does. So you have a pretty good idea of what you need. You pick it, you add it, and then, even more helpful, it will sort of walk you through what you need to put in. Now, when you see min, number 1, number 2, that can be a little bit confusing. But what it does, it will try to guide you through and give you information as to what you need to do. Here, for example, you're putting a range in. You're telling it, please look at C4 through C55, and it shows you all the numbers in that range. And then it says, please, then at the bottom here, it will kick back the lowest number in that range, lets you know what the answer is. So you can figure out, you can sort of check Excel's math and see if you get the response you're expecting. And then it explains to you, again, what it's expecting for you to put in. Very helpful. So, take your time when you're using the insert function dialog box, and a lot of times you can figure out in a very real way what you're doing, and you'll come out understanding the math better because you didn't have to do a whole lot of heavy lifting. Excel will walk you through stuff. If you want to directly insert a function, you can go ahead, like I said, type it, put the function in, and just fill it out. Excel will even help you, and you can see over here it gives you suggestions on what you need to put in. All right. Use autofill. This is sort of copying on steroids. Instead of having to hit, if you're on a PC, Control-Z, or if you're on a Mac, I set that as Z, Control-C, or if you're on a Mac as Command-C. What autofill does is just let you click this little button right here, the little square at the edge of the rectangle, and you can drag it over or you can drag it down, and it will autofill the formula over. It automatically adjusts it. It's one of the handier things you can do, and honestly, if I'm working in a column, A lot of times I'll simply double click on that little box and it'll fill down as far as it can go. In your homeworks, you're going to be asked to do autofill a lot. You can use copy in its place, but I found that you have to click a whole heck of a lot more. So autofill with just either one click or clicking and dragging tends to be a little bit better. If you want to write a formula out from scratch and not use a function, you just start with an equals, you type the formula in, and you press enter on the keyboard to get a result. Then you could autofill it down if you need to, or across, whatever happens to work best for you. Sort of as a non sequitur here, they throw the rank EQ function in. It takes all of the stuff you just learned and mushes it together in one great big Play-Doh ball. What rank EQ does is it gives you the order of a number in a list. So let's say I've got the 50 states and I've got a column that has all of their populations in it. The order is alphabetical. So we start with Alabama or Alaska and end with Wyoming. Well, I think Alaska and Wyoming probably have the lowest population of all. So, they might be 50 and 49. What rank EQ does is you set aside a column and you say, I'd like you to take this number, for example, and compare it against the entire column. So it then will give you where things rank and list it in that column. And then the nice thing is, because you've got a ranking, you can just put them in order and rank them from smallest to largest if you want. Now, duplicate values are assigned the same rank. So if your numbers are 5, 20, 20, and 5, their respective ranks would be 1, 2, 2, and 4. A little weird. But anyway, that's the way that works. So to make rank EQ work, you would click the cell where you want to that you want to put the result in. Pick insert function. You really want to use insert function here. Find rank EQ and hit OK. Then, like I said before, you tell it the number you want to rank, and then you tell it, including that number, the range that you want to rank it against. So let's see. I think this is column G. So what he is wanting you to do is take this number and rank it against the entire column. So you would, once you put the rank EQ function in, you would click on this, and then you would go to the reference array, and then you would click and select that entire column, okay, from G4 through G54. You'll click the OK button, and it'll return the results. It's actually pretty easy, and we do that in the first homework problem, so you want to make sure you look at it. Now, of all the stuff that we talked about in this, you want to make sure that you look at the absolute values. That is going to be the biggest thing on your exam, and you want to make sure you've got it down tight. It's covered mostly on homework 3 and on participation 5. We revisited a few times, but that's one of the areas that I see students being most weak in. So please be careful there. Thanks. And I'll talk to you in class.